man with no badge, no authority, and no real power controlled people for a decade using nothing but a story he made up in a pub. He wasn't a spy. He wasn't a cult leader. He was a bartender. His name was Robert Freegard, born in Derbyshire in 1971. In the early 1990s, he was working behind the bar at the Swan, a pub in Newport, Shropshire. No money, no connections, no training, just a friendly face behind the counter and a talent for sounding like he knew things other people didn't. Students from Harper Adams Agricultural College drank at the Swan, and that's where Freegard found his first targets. In 1992, he pulled aside a student named John Atkinson and told him quietly and seriously that he was an MI5 operative working undercover and that an IRA cell was operating inside the college. This was the early 90s. The IRA was real. The threat felt plausible, and a 21-year-old agriculture student had no framework for deciding whether the friendly barman was telling the truth. Atkinson believed him. Then Freegard told him to prove his loyalty. He made Atkinson let himself be beaten up to show he was hard enough for the work. He also made him behave bizarrely around campus to alienate him from his friends. Atkinson did all of it. From there, the con expanded. Freegard told Atkinson to lie to his girlfriend Sarah Smith and their friend Maria Hendy, tell them he had liver cancer, take them on a farewell tour across England. Once they were away from everyone they knew, Freegard told them the truth about the mission. All three were now supposedly in danger. He told them to cut off all contact with their families, change their identities, and hand over their money. They moved to Sheffield, gave him everything they had, and started living under his rules, and the rules were brutal. He controlled when they ate, where they lived, and who they talked to. Sarah Smith spent years moving between cheap flats and B&Bs, sometimes going hungry, completely cut off from everyone she knew. She couldn't contact her parents, couldn't explain where she was, couldn't ask for help. Meanwhile, Freegard used the money he took from her and the others to buy designer suits, a Rolex, handmade shoes, expensive cars, and 5-star holidays in Brazil. The people he claimed to be protecting lived like fugitives. He lived like a man on a permanent vacation. She later said he played Duran Duran's Ordinary World on a loop in the car during their moves, and that 20 years later hearing that song still put her right back in it. Maria Hendy became his girlfriend. They had 2 daughters together. He forced her to live in a cramped flat in Sheffield while he controlled her every move. He beat her badly enough that she lost a tooth, and then he did something that tells you exactly how his mind worked. He changed his surname by deed poll to Hendy-Freegard, taking her name to make himself sound more established. He used his own victim's identity to build a better disguise. The method never changed. If a victim felt confused, that meant the threat was real. If a parent asked questions, that was a security risk. If the instructions made no sense, that only proved how serious the situation was. Once somebody accepted that logic, every doubt became more evidence that they needed him. What would you do if someone you trusted kept insisting that hesitation could trigger an assassination? And he kept finding new people. In 2000, he convinced a company director named Renata Kister that MI5 had told him to watch someone at the car dealership where he worked. He got her to buy a new car, sold her old one, kept the money, and talked her into taking out a £15,000 loan for him. He also asked her to give a room to Sarah Smith, who he said was in witness protection. He told Kister that Smith couldn't speak English and told Smith to pretend she couldn't understand anything. So the 2 women would never actually talk to each other. 2 victims under the same roof, each one isolated by a different lie. Around the same time, he met a lawyer named Carolyn Cowper at a West London car dealership. He helped her change her car, pocketed the difference, and then kept going. more money for a fake business they'd supposedly run together, and £14,000 stolen from her building society account. Over roughly a decade, from about 1992 to 2002, he extracted more than £1 million from his victims. Not by promising returns or selling a luxury fantasy, by convincing ordinary people that their lives were in danger and he was the only person who could protect them. Then he made a mistake. He started a relationship with an American psychologist named Kimberly Adams. It's been reported that he targeted her partly because her stepfather had won the lottery, which tells you that even after a decade, Freegard was still picking targets based on who had money he could reach. But her family did something his earlier victims had been trained never to do. They refused to believe him. They didn't accept the MI5 story, didn't accept the secrecy, and instead of going quiet, they went to the authorities and pushed hard for someone to investigate. Once investigators started comparing what different victims had lived through, the pattern became impossible to miss. Separate people across the UK had heard the same warnings, faced the same invented threat, and been drained for money under the same official-sounding excuses. The case pulled in the Metropolitan Police and the FBI. They set up a controlled handoff tied to Kimberly Adams. And in August 2002, Freegard went to Heathrow Airport expecting to collect cash. Instead, he walked into a joint sting and got arrested. The man who had spent a decade pretending to run covert intelligence operations was now on the receiving end of a real one. In 2005, at Blackfriars Crown Court, he was convicted on 2 counts of kidnapping, 10 theft offenses, and 8 deception offenses. He received a life sentence. But in 2007, the Court of Appeal quashed the kidnapping convictions, ruling that tricking someone into moving from place to place by fraud does not legally constitute kidnapping. The fraud conviction stayed, but the life sentence was gone. He was released in 2009 after serving about 7 years. Sarah Smith's father, Peter, had spent a decade searching for his daughter through his own investigation, refusing to give up even when the trail went cold. She eventually got out, but she lost 10 years of her life and £180,000. Most of the money Freegard took was spent on himself and never recovered, and then he did it again. In 2011, using the name David Hendy, he met a woman named Sandra Clifton through online dating. He claimed to work in media, hinted at wealth, and won her over with expensive gifts and trips. Over the next several years, he reportedly isolated her from her children, Sophie and Jake, and from their father, using the same methods he'd always used: deception, control, and steady mental pressure. Sandra eventually stopped all contact with her own children. As of the Netflix documentary The Puppet Master in 2022, she was still with him, and her children were still trying to reach her. In August 2022, a man identified by French media as Hendy-Freegard injured 2 police officers in a hit-and-run in rural France after they came to inspect his dog breeding operation. A bartender from Derbyshire who pretended to be a spy for a decade went to prison, got out, and was last seen running from French police over dogs. Enjoyed this story? Leave a like, subscribe, and stay tuned for the next one. Now you know.